Dr. Richard Land, president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Liberty Commission, thanks so much for being with us on Newsmax TV today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, Dr. Land, what role do you see conservative Christians and evangelical conservatives playing in the 2012 election? And do you think that they could actually decide the election?
Well, they may. I think this election is going to be close enough that virtually anything could decide it. But let's remember that self-identified evangelicals make up 26.3% of the population, and they made up 29% of the people who actually voted in the 2010 election. That's the largest identifiable demographic group in the electorate. So this is the largest single voting bloc in the electorate. So obviously they're going to make a huge difference in which way they go. And so I think evangelicals, as I go around the country, are very engaged in this election. They just understand intuitively that this is a different kind of election. This election is, I think, the most important election since 1860. And that was a pretty important election. Thank God for Abraham Lincoln. I think that this country is making a very basic decision in this election about which direction it's going to go. Is it going to become like France, or is it going to return to being the United States? And so I see this as a remake America versus a restore America election. And after we make the decision this time, the economic consequences of the decision are so overwhelming that there'll be no coming back from it. If we go in the direction that President Obama wants us to go, 4 more years of those policies, we will be locked in to high taxes, high government spending, and our children and our grandchildren will be paying off our debts because we're living on their earnings. We're borrowing from their future, and we will be so far down the road that there'll be no coming back.
Pollster John Zogby tells me that Mitt Romney has a big problem in that 16% of evangelicals are undecided. A third say they will never elect a Mormon as president. At the end of the day, will evangelicals rally around or reject Mitt Romney?
Well, some will, some won't. I mean, clearly there are some evangelicals who, for reasons of conscience, will not vote for a Mormon. I think that's a minority. I think it's a significant minority, but they are there, and there's no denying that. And whether or not that will decide the election, I don't know. I think probably the most valuable thing that Mitt Romney has going for him among evangelicals is Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama will do more. Barack Obama and Barack Obama's policies will do more to unite evangelicals than anything Mitt Romney does.
That was going to be my next question for you. What are Southern Baptists and evangelicals' biggest concerns with the Obama administration?
Wow. Obamacare, number one. Most Southern Baptists, and certainly a majority of evangelicals, want Obamacare buried in a lead coffin with a wooden stake through its heart, lined in garlic and covered in cement. They hate it. They hate it because they intuitively understand that it is built totally on a pro-choice ethic, an anti-life ethic. It has cooked into it rationing of care. People say, well, no, there's no rationing. Of course there is. You take $500 billion out of Medicare to help fund Obamacare just at the point that the baby boomers begin to retire, a new 65-year-old every 8 seconds for the next 18 years. That means that people are going to have to wait longer to see a doctor. They're going to have to wait longer between the time they're diagnosed and the time they're treated. For people in that age bracket, that's often a death sentence. And I'm already getting emails and phone calls and letters from people who are on Medicare who, under Dr. Berwick, a recess appointment, because he couldn't get through the Senate, a recess appointment by Obama, who says he has a romantic love affair with the British system of medicine. People are being denied care if they're terminal. For instance, if they have terminal cancer, They can't get treatment for eyesight because they can go blind. Because they're terminal, they can't get anything but palliative care. If they have a stroke after they're 70, they can't get anything but palliative care. Most Americans, certainly most Southern Baptists, find that to be anathema. I think the assault on religious liberty is another one. We don't agree with the Catholics about contraception, but we certainly defend to the death their right to have that conviction and not be forced by the government to pay for that which they find unconscionable. And perhaps the biggest insight into the heart of the Obama administration is their argumentation in the Tabor case. Now, the Tabor case was a Supreme Court case where a woman who was a religion teacher in a Lutheran school was fired, and she filed with the EEOC. And the Obama administration argued that a church school affiliated with a church has no more special protections under the law than a country club. Their position was so radical that they lost 9-0 in the Supreme Court. Even Elena Kagan and Justice Sotomayor, their two appointments, voted against them. And I thought John Roberts summed it up well, the Chief Justice. He said, I find it remarkable that the Obama administration would argue that there are no special protections for religion in the First Amendment since religion is mentioned twice.
Now, President Obama's support of same-sex marriage, what impact do you see that having on the American family?
Well, it's devastating. The attempt to redefine marriage to include same-sex relationships will shatter the definition of marriage. And marriage is an endangered enough institution in our society, and it is causing enormous pain and enormous emotional and economic dislocation. This country spends $700 billion a year at the federal level, $200 billion more a year at the state level on needs-based welfare, basically to make up for absent fathers. And when we try to make same-sex same-sex relationships marriage, we are further shattering the family. We've had a 40-year experiment in this country on whether or not fathers are optional accessories in the rearing of healthy, productive adults, and the answer is they're not. But up until now, no one's argued that mothers are optional accessories. But so-called same-sex marriage argues that mothers are optional accessories, that two men can do as good a job of raising a child as a mother and a father can. That's just insane. Americans understand this intuitively. Every time they've had a chance to vote on this, they voted it down. Right now, the score is 32-0. 32 states have actually voted on this. 32 states have defeated same-sex relationships being called marriage. You know, Abe Lincoln was once asked, how many legs would a dog have if you called a tail a leg? And he said 4, because a tail's not a leg. Same-sex relationships are not marriage.
Now, President Obama insists that he is a Christian. Do you believe that he is governed that way?
Well, you know, I think everybody's entitled to define their own faith. I think that Barack Obama is a very typical 21st century mainline Protestant.
How come?
That's his background. He was led to the Christian faith by Reverend Wright, who is a pastor in the United Church of Christ, which is the most liberal denomination in mainline Protestantism. Now that's saying something. The United Church of Christ is widely acknowledged to be the most liberal denomination in the phalanx of mainline Protestant denominations. And Reverend Wright is one of the most liberal ministers in that denomination. So you would expect President Obama to be a reflection of his spiritual and religious background.
Dr. Land, last question for you. 140 evangelical leaders from across the country, Democrats and Republicans, are united on the issue of comprehensive immigration reform. Can you talk to us about where there's consensus on this issue?
Yeah. I think that that evangelicals have moved on this issue. I've seen Southern Baptists move. I've been trying to help them move on this issue. In 2011, we passed a resolution by vote of messengers from our churches with an 80% vote in Phoenix, calling for comprehensive immigration reform that secures the borders, that has a pathway of restitution and of probation, and a pathway to legal status for those who are here in an undocumented status. So they have an opportunity to come forward, register, pay a fine, undergo a background check, and depending on how long they've been here, have a period of probation, at the end of which, if they've learned to speak English and to write English and pass a test on it that they've done so, they can remain here in a legal status. And to try to deal with the children of the undocumented. You know, we have approximately 1 million children in this country who have done nothing wrong. They were brought here by their parents, some of them when they were babies. They know no other country but the United States. They've been raised here, they've gone to high school here, and now they're in a state of limbo. In some states, they can't go to college. They can't get legal immigrant status. We're saying part of a comprehensive immigration process is to say to these young people, here is a way you can come forward, and you can, if you go to junior college, if you go to college, if you serve in the military, you can earn a pathway to legal status. Because let's remember, these 1 million these people who live in this country know nothing about their native country. They didn't bring themselves here. They're innocent. So we think that there needs to be a comprehensive immigration reform that goes right from the start. Our immigration system is broken. Everything about it's broken. We need to fix it. We need to find a pathway to earned legal status for those that are here in an undocumented status. We need to secure the workplace to make sure we don't have masses more come across the border. That can be done. It just takes the will to do it. We need to secure the border. That can be done, especially if you secure the workplace. Because if you secure the workplace, if they can't get work when they get here, they're not going to come. It'll cut the flow by 90%. The other 10% we can control at the border. Now, people say to me, well, what about this, what about that? Well, I'll give you a quote that supposedly Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave when he was asked about the details of the civil rights legislation in the mid-60s. He said, I'm going to continue to speak about principle and to say, let righteousness roll down like rivers of living water. I'll let President Johnson worry about the plumbing.
All right. Dr. Richard Land, thanks so much for being with us on Newsmax TV. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.